The following is from a book review and analysis video I made on Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. The book is an autobiographical account of Frederick Douglass's upbringing in slavery and his escape from slavery. This clip covers some of the many passages within that are full of valuable historical and philosophical information. Please enjoy, and may your conversations related to racism and the history of slavery be made better by watching. The title of this third section in this analysis portion of the video is called Reading to Freedom. At one point in Frederick Douglass's upbringing, he was sold to a really kind white family, husband, wife, and specifically the wife. She was very kind. Frederick described how he had never seen a white person smile so wholesomely at him whenever she first laid eyes on him. And so, this woman, this mistress, she, even though she owned Frederick, she loved him. She treated him like a, like a good little boy, and she decided that she was going to teach him how to read. And the reason that she was, this way towards Frederick is because she had not yet been corrupted by the institution of slavery, since she had not yet been a slave owner before she had Frederick. And so, as you'll see here, she was very naive about the culture of enslaving people, and that naivete happened to give Frederick a significant leg up in his journey towards freedom, even though that leg was kicked out from underneath him very soon, as you'll see in this passage. Very soon after I went to live with Mr. and Mrs. Auld, she very kindly commenced to teach me the ABC. After I had learned this, she assisted me in learning to spell words of 3 or 4 letters. Just at this point of my progress, Mr. Auld found out what was going on and at once forbade Mrs. Auld to instruct me further, telling her, among other things, that it was unlawful as well as unsafe to teach a slave to read. To use his own words further, he said, "If you give a nigger an inch, he will take an awl. A nigger should know nothing but to obey his master, to do as he is told to do. Learning will spoil the best nigger in the world. Now," he said, "if you teach that nigger," speaking of myself, "how to read, there would be no keeping him. It would forever unfit him to be a slave. He would at once become unmanageable and of no value to his master. As to himself, it could do him no good, but a great deal of harm. It would make him discontented and unhappy." These words sank deep into my heart, stirred up sentiments within that lay slumbering, and called into existence an entirely new train of thought. It was a new and special revelation, explaining dark and mysterious things, with which my youthful understanding had struggled, but struggled in vain. I now understood what had been to me a most perplexing difficulty, to wit, the white man's power to enslave the black man. It was a grand achievement, and I prized it highly. From that moment, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom. It was just what I wanted, and I got it at a time when I the least expected it. Whilst I was saddened by the thought of losing the aid of my kind mistress, I was gladdened by the invaluable instruction which, by the merest accident, I had gained from my master. Though conscious of the difficulty of learning without a teacher, I set out with high hope and a fixed purpose, at whatever cost of trouble, to learn how to read. The very decided manner with which he spoke, and strove to impress his wife with the evil consequences of giving me instruction, served to convince me that he was deeply sensible of the truths he was uttering. It gave me the best assurance that I might rely with the utmost confidence on the results which, he said, would flow from teaching me to read. What he most dreaded, that I most desired. What he most loved, that I most hated. That which to him was a great evil, to be carefully shunned, was to me a great good, to be diligently sought. And the argument which he so warmly urged against my learning to read only served to inspire me with a desire and determination to learn. In learning to read, I owe almost as much to the bitter opposition of my master as to the kindly aid of my mistress. I acknowledge the benefit of both. So you see there, Frederick realizes that education, learning, understanding the situation that he's in, that it's not the only situation that there is or that's possible for someone like him, learning about the world, learning about the abolitionist movement, learning, reading, thinking. That's the way out of slavery, because you can outwit the white man if you also gain some wits yourself. What's so amazing is that really, learning the ABCs and those few lessons that his mistress gave him, that was really the beginning of Frederick Douglass's escape. He talks, I believe maybe in the same chapter, I'm not sure, about how, since his mistress wasn't going to teach him how to read anymore, he had to find other ways to learn. And one of the ways that's really clever, one of the really clever ways he learned how to read and write was he would challenge little white boys on the street by saying, "I bet I can write better than you." And the white boys would say, "What are you talking about? You're a slave. You can't write." And so what he would do is that he would then write, and he obviously couldn't write much, and the little white boys would go, "Oh, come on, no, you made a mistake there. Look, you're supposed to do it this way." And so essentially Frederick Douglass would trick little white boys into teaching him how to properly read and write. Amazing. He also talks about how he would steal spelling books from some of the kids that he had to serve as a slave, who were in school, and he would copy them. But he really, it's such an amazing, inspiring story how he had the whole world against him, and yet he learned that education, reading, learning was the way out, and it ended up being his way out. In fact, one of the wild things about this book is Frederick Douglass, first and foremost, he wrote this book to prove that he had been a slave, because he had been writing for a little while whenever he finally escaped to freedom, and people did not believe him when he said he was a slave because he wrote so well. They're like, "How could a slave write this? No, he must be a fraud." And so Frederick wrote Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass to prove who his masters were, and so he named them, and to prove that he had been a slave who had learned how to read and write extremely well, and how he wrote this showing how that was the way that he became the most prolific civil rights activist of the 1800s. And it just goes to show that believing that you're oppressed, even if you are oppressed, focusing on your oppression and thinking that your oppression will never end and just giving up is never the way to go. Because Frederick, if he had just decided, "Oh, the white man's got his boot on me, I'll never get out from underneath it," then he would have never gotten out from underneath it. But he committed to learning how to properly read and write, and he committed to, finding freedom no matter what. And he eventually got it because he never gave up. He never took the L. He never listened to the people who said it's hopeless. And I think that's just a great lesson for everybody of all races to have today. Whenever you are told you can't do it, you can't, there are people in your way who will stop you. No. More often than not, those people that may be in your way to stop you will only stop you if you allow them to stop you. And Frederick did not allow the people in his life, namely his slave owners and masters, to stop him from achieving freedom and success and all the things in between.